So, how much do you know about the history of Creole language? Well, from the 1920s to 1940s, homosexuality was considered a pathology and often also a criminal offense. Technically, cops could arrest those who exhibit homosexual behavior in public and dancing with a person of same sex. They have been arresting drag queens, gay hustlers, and transgender women regularly for cross-dressing, for obstructing the sidewalk, or for any reason they could find to throw them in jail. And maybe because they recognize the discrimination from the community around them, homosexuals took the first steps in forming a kind of language for their own community. At the same time, according to research on the language of homosexuality, as it was now focused on the vocabulary and on the use by openly homosexual males of female names and pronouns to designate themselves and other men. Research has viewed it as a kind of secret code that homosexuals use to communicate their deviant sexuality to those who can internalize it. For example, we have the word a sister means a close friend. A mother means a gay mother. And lady means a homosexual male. These are all words from the lexicon of Polari, a secret language used by gay men in Britain at a time when homosexuality was illegal. Now move to the second phase. The second phase of research on gay and lesbian language occurred in the 1950s and 1960s with the emergence of activist struggles around the homosexual rights. The end of this period was a famous movement which changed the perception of people in the LGBT community, helping them to dare to stand up and fight for their rights. It's called Stonewall. In the early morning hours on June 28 in 1969, the New York Stonewall riots broke out in response to a police raid, marking the beginning of the gay rights movement in the U.S. Tensions between New York City police and gay residents of Greenwich Village erupted into more protests the next evening, and again several nights later. Within weeks, village residents organized into activist groups demanding the right to live openly regarding their sexual orientation and without fear of being arrested. A year after the uprising, to mark the anniversary on June 28 in 1970, the first gay pride marches took place in Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, and San Francisco. Within a few years, gay rights organizations were founded across the US and the world. Today, LGBT pride events are held annually in June in honor of the Stonewall riots. Along with these movements, homosexuals wanted to be recognized as other normal community groups. So at the same time, the advancement in research on gay and lesbian language emerged, which was the creation of a new kind of homosexual identity that made homosexuality move from being considered a medical condition to being conceived of as a social identity. What happened by the 1970s and 1980s was that the gay liberationist rhetoric expressed confidence that a new gay and lesbian community had been formed, which replaced the old-style homosexuals. The previous decade's stress on divisions among homosexuals were toned down, and homosexuality was framed as an oppressed minority identity, similar to a minority ethnic or racial identity. Influenced by arguments of sociolinguists about Black English vernacular or women's language, scholars claim that there is a kind of homosexual language, or gay speak. This reflected the fact that homosexuals, like other minorities, had particular social identities and constituted a definable or relatively homogeneous social group. And during the 1990s, the identity-based model of homosexuality came under fire. Resurrecting the term queer to name their new political movements, gay liberationists highlight the diversity within the non-straight world, and they celebrate the identities of drag queens, transsexuals, bisexuals, sadomasochists, and even butch femme couples. Now, the reality is that homosexuals want to be identified in their community through language, not because they are gays so they have their own language. This stems from the fact that homosexuals recognize the value of their community and they have taken pride in it. Thus, in terms of gays and lesbian language, some researchers shifted their inquiry from looking at how gay and lesbian identity is reflected through language to investigating the ways in which those identities themselves are materialized through language. In other words, focus shifted from seeing identity as the source of particular forms of language to seeing identity as the effect of specific semiotic practices. In short, these four phases are an overview of history as well as the process of queer language change from the 1920s to present. So we hope this information will be useful to you. Thanks for listening.